Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection as we do most days, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Kyle. Munchausen by Proxy by Major Parkinson. A short standalone single released after Blackbox. The song is named after a mental health disorder or a form of abuse in which a caregiver fakes a child's chronic health issues. That's wild. I've never heard of this before. All right. We're going to check this out. Let's see what Major Parkinson is bringing to the table today. Oh, I missed it? Very interesting accent pattern on this. A lot of directionality in the drum and bass, but melancholy from the melodies. It's interesting in moments like this, there's almost no melody. Everything is on a tight loop. Oh, okay, we're just done. That final section was in 13, alternating groups of 7 and 6. Makes me wonder about some of the other parts of this track too. The beginning of the song I felt was in 4/4, based on this perceived pulse on the guitar drone. And then the guitar drone drips and melts, and then it skyrockets back up. And I was like, okay, I got this. And then I wrongly anticipated it. And that made me intrigued by what was going on with that temporally. Then the full band comes in. I never quite got a feel for when the dripping part happened behind the main guitar riff and the bass and the drums. I thought at times it was working in groups of bars of 3 instead of 4, which is a bit more symmetrical. I never confirmed that. There were so many other things going on I needed to pay attention to, that I just kind of accepted there's this cool drippy thing happening in the background of this rock song. But then we get the violins coming in, and then the falsetto vocals, and the rhythmic thing here is weird too. Very odd accent pattern, both for speech, what syllables to stress, but also just the general cadence of the song from a more rhythmic and musical perspective. Those were really strange places to put such heavy emphasis, especially not just with the vocals putting more bite on these specific syllables, but having the strings, and I think there was another, maybe the guitar also leaning into these specific notes with the vocals. I was so thrown off by everything happening here on the sonic level, on the rhythmic level. I completely forgot to even check into the time signature, but was that even in 4/4? Because those accent patterns would be odd in 4/4, but maybe not so much if we were in 3 or 7 or 13, any other non-traditional grouping patterns. Makes me want to go back and check some of that out, because what made me think about it at the end was that atmospherically, sonically, kind of had a gist for everything that we were doing. It's just the rhythm. I was like, oh, dude, this is a little different. This isn't 4/4. What's going on here? And I actually had a chance to sit down with just the time of it all and figure that out. The rest of the song, I mean, there's always so much going on. It's almost like a carnival at times where, it's just like, oh, look over there, look over there, look over there. So many things to grab your attention. And that's fun. Absolutely. It just does, it makes a first time analysis quite difficult. But there is some temporal stuff, or at the very minimum, some rhythmic stuff going on in here that's really interesting, unusual, and it caught my attention pretty consistently throughout the track. So I want to start off with that, simply because I do feel like it is the wildest part of the song, at least for me. A lot of the other elements locked into more digestible and understandable concepts. I mean, right off the bat, we had this strong, like an alternative rock, hard rock kind of thing going on at the beginning. Strong guitar parts, big bass parts on the bottom, very straightforward drum work, although interesting accent points in that first section. That was the other instrument lining up with the vocals there. And of course, we have the falsetto at the beginning, which is an interesting sound to use as long as they did and then never return to. I'm curious if the lyrics are going to back that up at all, or if that's purely I was going to say cosmetic, but a sonic perspective on that. Did they just think it sounded cool to do falsetto there for so long? But it's also another bit of an unusual choice here. We have the expanded instrumentation around the rock band that helps fill this section out. And it all starts off pretty rhythmic, pretty textured. And this is something that's really interesting. And I pointed this out after we got through the instrumental bridge. I also have no idea what the structure is on this track. To me, it felt very linear, though we did have 2 clear verses. That's the only thing that I felt had any sort of cycle to it. But the other thing that stands out to me is that so much of this song is rhythmic and textural and atmosphere. I mean, many of these instruments, they just take 3 notes or so and then just kind of loop those notes over and over and over with varying rhythmic ideas. Sure, but it's just a tight loop. Even the vocals end up being on these really tight concepts, and the words themselves are changing, but the musical component, what notes are picked, how long those notes exist for, That's pretty consistent over and over and over and over. Everything in this track is about these really tight loops creating something that is chaotic, something incredibly detailed and textured and dense. That is until we get to the bridge. And one, I really like this section because we had this beautiful melodic stuff going on. I got to hear this da-da-dun, 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 almost a gallopy thing coming from the drum and bass, our rhythm section down there. Like I mentioned, a lot of forward momentum these two instruments are pushing through in this moment. But we have these melodies, linear, just kind of flourishing all over the place, sometimes interlocking, giving us cool harmony on this melody, other times sort of doing their own thing, exploring their own space. It was very wild to hear the violins go from playing a very tight riff, short, concise, to the point, there to create a sharp atmosphere, to being this melodically driving force, being the lead element of the song here and pulling it through with narrative melodic writing. I then found the stark transition back to a verse type idea where the vocals came back in as the lead and the rest of the instruments line back up into these short riffs again. And it just gets very textural and atmospheric. We lose out on a lot of the melodic qualities there. It feels so much like the violins are putting on a show for most of this, and then they get a chance for freedom, and they play the most beautiful things, and then they get caged again, and they have to put the show back on, and it's just cool sounding music, right? There's definitely a rule of cool element to the riff writing on this. But those melodies feel free, they feel open, they're so diverse from the rest of the track, they stand out in massive opposition. Why? What does that mean? I found this moment to be equally gorgeous and sad to hear these instruments kind of cut their ideas short to return back to the small loop. And then the end of the song then is all this build up, this energy, and then, what was it, like a door slam or something? It was just a very abrupt end. I don't even think it ended at the end of the phrase. We didn't even have the harmonic finale to the chord progression. I don't think the phrasing of the loop itself didn't reach a symmetrical repetition either. It just ends abruptly with a door slamming, which goes along really well with my idea of feeling caged in, of being performant rather than expressive. I don't know if the lyrics are actually going to go in this direction at all, but this is what I feel listening to this track. And I wish, for two reasons, that we could have had more of those lead melody parts. One, I just found them gorgeous, but two, it really felt like a freedom that was contained really quickly. The other thing that stands out to me, and I don't know that I have a lot to add on to this yet, but it does seem thematically important, are the vocals. I mentioned we start off with this falsetto and we stay with them for a really long time, but there is a transition moving from head voice into chest voice. And the chest voice is gritty, it's dark, it's lower, and it's kind of angry. I don't know if that's just me or if that's, how they're wanting to deliver that. I suppose there's another third point where it could just be the way the guy sings. See, every song he sings this way. This is just a singing voice. But it comes off to me as very gruff and aggressive. Definitely a level of anger in there. And we never return back to that falsetto again. These are two very distinct styles. And it's not, if it were a song where the falsetto was the verses and the chest voice was the chorus, I'd chalk that up to the music, right? But no, the music that surrounds the vocals, and these are the two, what I'm going to call verses in this track, the music's pretty similar in both of them. The atmosphere, the roles of all the instruments, the type of playing, I don't know if it's note for note identical, but they're definitely crafted from the same blueprint. But the vocals are drastically different in both of these. It's a recontextualization of this atmosphere through a new timbre being added to the track. That timbre just happens to be the same instrument it was last time, human vocals, and the same vocalist at that. To me, there's a story there. You don't just do that. Conventional writing says when you return to the verse, pretty much everything returns. If you change the voice for something, you're going to put it back. But he doesn't. It never goes back to that falsetto. It's an interesting track here. Very, I was going to say eclectic, and it does have some interesting ideas in it, but I think eclectic is too strong of a word. It is a bit more on the palatable side generally, but it does like to venture out into more experimental concepts here and there. And we did check out an entire album from them, right? Blackbox, I think, was an album review we did. I gotta go refresh myself though, because I remember them being rocky, but not like this. So this was quite surprising based on the idea I had in my head for them. I think I'm gonna refresh myself in that a little bit. Comments about that change, especially since this came after Blackbox. I don't know how closely after. And then we'll also discuss lyrics. All right, I did go listen to, well, I started with the first track off of Blackbox, and quite different to this. So I listened to another, and that's when it dawned on me. I remember Blackbox now. That is an album of many faces, and that's why I didn't really have a solid idea of what Major Parkinson is in my mind, because they can't really be boiled down to a sound. They are incredibly progressive, and every track off that album was wildly different. So yeah, this one being what it is makes sense. There is, though, something I forgot to bring up was a bit of a Cardiacs-esque rhythmic and harmonic cadence at the very beginning of the song. I feel like as the track went on, it kind of became less Cardiacs-y, but this was also something I commented on during Blackbox as well. Now, lyrically, there is, I don't know that I would have come to this without the title of the song, but there is an element of being controlled by someone who's supposed to, or who you presume to care about you. At one point, calling themselves a mated marionette says that been birthed by the Pavlovian hounds of love. Pavlov's dogs is, or was, a psychological experiment to, the main concept of it was that Pavlov, I can't remember his first name, he like rung a bell during dinner time for some dogs. So they would smell the food and hear the bell ring and mentally create an association. And the intent was that when the bell was rung, they would begin salivating for food, even if the food wasn't present. It's about controlling biological behaviors. And he's saying that Pavlovian hounds of love says that his love is being controlled by external factors, is what's coming up there. So we have biological control in here, which lines up with the idea of Munchausen by proxy, which is basically medical gaslighting, where someone who's supposed to be your caregiver either lies or falsifies about symptoms you're having, while also maybe even creating those symptoms within you. So once again, biological control under the guise of something positive, caregiving or love. And this all lines up, like I said, with the idea of the mated marionette, a puppet to be controlled, once again lining up with this idea of a relationship, though, of being mated to someone. But aside from that, I'm not sure I get a lot out of these lyrics. The opening stanza says, "You blow my mind away every day. I am the uncanny valley boy." The uncanny valley is a concept of a point where, as we create more and more realistic robots or even AI, there will be a point when they're just realistic enough that we can notice there's something off about them. Like up to that point, they're obviously robots. They have robotic bodies. They might act human and they might pass as more humanoid, but they're still clearly robots. But at a certain point, they're going to not be robots. They're going to look more human, but definitely not the right kind of human. And we're kind of dip down in this element of how realistic are they? And this is the uncanny valley. Eventually we'll skyrocket out of that, and it will be the valley on this graph where it was too realistic, but not realistic enough. And it creates this weird point here where our brains are like, nah, dude, that's monstrous. Before and after that, we could accept. In that uncanny valley, nah, it's too wild. So he says, I'm the uncanny valley boy. And I don't know what, I mean, maybe this is a play on like Valley Girl, Valley Boy, but I'm not sure what the uncanny valley element is supposed to represent here. It says, nimble and perplexing, no liver, no lungs, I'm lurking in the garret, the stairway, the hall. I think you've heard this story before. I don't know. None of this really makes sense other than saying he doesn't have much of an identity. He just lurks places, and this may line up with him feeling like he's a puppet to someone else, but with so many other elements of this where not even just the line, but a portion of the line carries so much weight. I can't believe that this is 7 lines here that are just supposed to say, I don't have control over my life. The lyrics seem too purposeful and intentful to kind of create something so vague at the beginning of the track. So I'm kind of curious if anyone gets anything else out of that, given that there's so many elements in here that feel like you need extra information to understand them. It might just be that I'm missing something to accurately understand this first stanza. But he says, I'm always coming home, coming back to the disco that they call Munchausen by proxy. They made me like this, a company of strangers, a surrogate kiss for something that you cannot obtain. The idea of being made like the way you are, once again, biological control. It says a company of strangers did this to them, and there was a surrogate kiss, something that's supposed to make you feel loved, but was provided by someone who doesn't love you. The surrogate part there. For something that you cannot obtain. And I think this is interesting because it's almost an element of vicarious living. That they are making this person the way they are because they wish that they could have had this or had this, whatever. It says that they can't obtain it. It doesn't say what it is. But they're trying to live vicariously through our narrator here. That's pretty much most of it. The song wraps up on one of us, one of a kind, can you hear me? One of us, one of a kind, baby, can you hear me? The one of us, though, is repeated, which I think is cool. It's like, one of us, one of us, one of a kind. I don't know if that's how it really goes, but, you know, the chant, one of us, is kind of iconic in pop culture. I can't remember what film I heard that in originally, or maybe it's just a television show. It's just, you know, it's one of those chants. It was done somewhere, and that unknowingly popularized it in pop culture zeitgeist, and everybody copied it. But the idea of one of us, one of us, one of a kind. And I think that's pretty cool because one of us is about a collective, one of a kind is about a unique singularity. How can you be one of a kind while part of a group? But then, baby, can you hear me? The baby part's a pet name. This is the idea of a caregiver or a lover. You might want to discard that, as it probably isn't a true pet name here, something just for the illusion of it. But can you hear me? I think I don't understand how it fits into anything. So I'm a bit lost on this one. I'm picking up pieces here and there. The breadcrumbs are leading somewhere. I'm on a journey. It's just, I don't know where yet. These are my thoughts, though, on Munchausen by Proxy by Major Parkinson. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own perspective, opinion, or even take on this track musically or lyrically? Both sides are pretty dense, and I'm open for other interpretations on either side of this. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.